Hello everyone and welcome to the Property Podcast. This is episode 197. And yes, we are near the end of 2016. So in this episode, we look back at our favourite things.
Yeah, we do. It's kind of one giant resource of the week. And seeing as that's one of the most popular sections of the show, hopefully this will be a popular episode. It's been a weird year in general for the world, I think we can say, but it's been a good year for us and a year in which we found loads of interesting things across books, podcasts, apps, and other kind of general stuff. We're going to be sharing all our highlights in this episode. First though, shock horror, buy-to-let is officially over. Some data has come out which you absolutely cannot argue with. Time to shut up shop and go home. Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, a bit of a bummer this to end the year on this one, guys, to let you know buy-to-let's done and dusted. But hey-ho, here's the news story. The headline of this particular story says, shock as sales of buy-to-let landlords are decimated by nearly 65% in a year. Wow. I guess we can safely say we're all done and dusted. But the first line goes on to say, the government's war on landlords has seen buy-to-let sales collapse 64% in 12 months and 8.2% on a monthly basis in November alone. Wowzers. Gosh. I'm glad someone's told me.
So, yeah, I mean, guess what? We so nearly made it to episode 200, but 197 will have to be it now. It's over.
Okay, well, have a great year in 2017, everyone. Bye-bye. No? Oh, wait there. There's more to this article, isn't there, Rob?
Yeah, there is. So you read past the first couple of paragraphs. What's the source of this data? One firm of estate agents. One firm of estate agents has had not the best year. This is Hart. And this decline, the figure comes from entirely from their own numbers. So let's have an alternative, shall we? Yellow Lettings puts out a story. Buy-to-let doubles in a year. Woo!
Yeah, Yellow Lettings had a very good year. And we could put out that story, but it wouldn't be as sensational, would it? So I think this news story is a good reminder and an excellent lesson of go beyond the headlines. We've talked about this so many times before in the podcast, but more than one person sent me this article. So it seems that we have to maybe reinforce the lesson, because that is a pretty irresponsible headline and opening paragraph as well, to be fair. So always look beyond the headlines. The headlines are meant to be sensational. If it was boring, you probably wouldn't read it. So make sure you do, because is it the true story? Or is it just a load of, oh no, it's only Christmas, can't use those words. Stuff that's not true. Let's go with that.
Let's go with that. So what is the truth? Well, that will emerge in time, probably, when we get official data. This is another kind of problem there seems to be. There's kind of like too much of a need for news too quickly. So people come out with figures based on not much in particular, rather than just waiting for the actual figures. I'm sure that these government interventions will have had some kind of effect. 65% decline? Not seeing it.
No. But what you will be seeing, or better said, listening to now, is a number of resources. So for those who are new to the Property Podcast, you may not know, but once a year we like to just gather our favourite things that we've discovered this year, whether it's things we've read, listened to, played with, used, watched, and we bring them all together in one episode. Is it strictly about property? Maybe parts of it are, but it's very popular, so that's why we're doing it. So Rob, we're known for liking a book or two, and confession time, I consider myself a bookworm. I'm self-confessed bookworm. It's been probably my poorest year in the last decade, actually. Oh, there's a headline there. But my poorest year, the last decade, for reading. However, I did get through a few books.
Has your reading been decimated?
It's been decimated in 2016.
Shock.
What about yourself? How's reading been for you this year? Have you found the time?
Not really. I had a good couple of books at the start of the year and I've got back into it recently, but well, I don't have as many excuses as you do because I don't have the young kids, but it has been a very busy year. And I've been reading a lot of blogs and various things. But yeah, in terms of books, it hasn't been a brilliant year, but I have got a few worth sharing, I think. But do you want to go first and share a couple of the ones you have read? Yeah,
this first one is probably not going to grab you by the title, but it's called Death by Meeting. And Rob, recently I said to you, have a listen to this one. I say listen because I consume this one via an audiobook because it's recommended to me that way. And I'm glad I did. Death by Meeting is a really interesting book, and it makes you approach meetings in a whole different way and mindset. Meetings for most people are seen as a necessity, an evil that they just have to deal with when they're at workplace or business, and they're a waste of time in most circumstances. And that could be true, but this book highlights that not only can meetings be semi-enjoyable, but are actually vital to any business, and so much can be achieved from them. It's a really interesting book, and if you're a business owner or a manager and you currently hold or attend meetings, then I would highly recommend it. You liked it, Rob?
I really did, and there were a few good insights in there, but just the overall message that meetings shouldn't be rubbish was kind of interesting, because I know when I was an employee, and probably a lot of people listening to this can relate to it as well, you spend a lot of time going to meetings which you just think are utterly pointless. And it seems like everyone there thinks it's utterly pointless. So why are you doing it? And it doesn't have to be that way. And then when you get to a certain level in business, you get to a point where a large proportion of what you're doing is leading and attending meetings. So you might as well try and make them good. Like you said, Rob, a lot of people just seem to be resigned to having bad meetings, pointless meetings, boring meetings. It doesn't have to be that way. And the way it's presented in the book, it's all in the form of a story. So it's really easy to listen to. And so if you do have bad meetings and you're in a position to do something about it, it's well worth a listen, because I did find that it sort of challenged me to make the meetings that I lead better than they currently are. I wouldn't say that they were terrible, but I realized that they weren't as good as I thought they were after listening to this book.
So first up on your list, Rob, because I can see ahead on the notes, is a book that I've downloaded with good intent, like many books this year, on my Kindle, but not yet read. So I'm interested to hear your review of this.
Yeah, this is a book called The Slight Edge. It's one of those books that you hear the name come up again and again. That's probably why you ended up downloading it. You do sort of see it popping up alongside books like The Magic of Thinking Big that we talked about before, like one of the classics in the personal development genre. I need to give a shout out to Dave, who finally tipped me over the edge for reading this one. I've had it recommended multiple times. He told me that given everything that I'm interested in and talk about, he couldn't believe that I hadn't read this book. So I put it right. And I'm glad I did. It's a very easy read, very simple to get through. It's a very simple idea at the heart of it, which is whenever you see something that looks like an overnight success, it never truly is. It's what you do, the small things that you do every day that compound over time to add up to something. So it's very rare that you'll just kind of make millions overnight. It's very rare that you'll suddenly have a breakthrough and become a big star overnight. You don't see the process leading up to it. And he says that it's those small habits that you build every day that cumulatively add up to success, but also the wrong habits could add up to failure. So it's a very simple book, but it's got a powerful message at the core of it. I find with lots of books, you read them and when you're reading it, you kind of feel like, oh yeah, well, I knew that all along. But you need the book to kind of make you realize that you knew that and prompt you to put some of it into action. So give it a try. I wouldn't say it was up there with the absolutely best books I've read. So like The One Thing is still my favorite personal development book, but Slight Edge, definitely worth checking out.
Okay, I'd say I'd go out and buy it, but I already have. So I'll bump it up my list and make sure I give it a read in 2017. One I'd highly recommend, and you will need time for this one, is a book called Titan. And it's Titan, The Life of John D. Rockefeller. So Rockefeller, most people will be familiar with at some level, often hear the phrase, well, do you think I am Rockefeller? Well, I certainly did as I was growing up, from my parents. But they never really expanded much further on that, on who was this Rockefeller. So I decided to, in my adult life, find out who. And it is an incredibly interesting read. Or listen. The reason why I say listen is this is a big old book. And when I see big, intimidating books, I tend to go to Audible. So this is over 24 hours worth of audio. So there's a lot to cover here. But it's an incredibly interesting life, from his conservative upbringing to his controversial growth in business to his incredible charity work. It's an incredible book, inspiring. Also take a lot of lessons from what I wouldn't like to do in life and business. But well worth it. You know, there's not many of these characters that come along. They're sort of generational, these type of people. Elon Musk arguably is a modern day version. We'll see if he feels his true potential is certainly on the way. But Rockefeller, very famous for a reason. And I really do believe that these historical figures, and it's not that long ago, but these historical figures, there's so many timeless lessons you can take from them. And this book is no different. Although it's a long one, very much worthwhile.
Yeah, I've had this one on my list for a really long time, and I've been put off by the length of it. It looks like it's one of those books that you start and then you can say goodbye to the next few months at least. But listening to it, perhaps sped up as well, sounds like a good idea to me. So I might check it out because, like you say, a lot to learn. And from what I know of it, a really fascinating life. So yeah, definitely one I'll be checking out next year.
Okay, one on your list here, Rob, that I am completely unfamiliar with, which is I would say unusual because my book radar is normally pretty strong, and it's called Speculator.
Yeah, this is a fiction book. It's by a guy called Doug Casey. He's like an, what would you call it? Like a kind of, guess like an economic commentator or something. He's one of these guys who does a lot of the kind of, the world's going to end, everything's going to collapse, buy gold kind of stuff. And he's constantly saying that and occasionally is right. But the book itself, this is his first work of fiction. And it's just a really good story. It's about mining speculation in Africa and about a young guy who goes out to try and uncover a fraud. It's just a really, really good read. And it's got a kind of a political libertarian message at the heart of it. So it's one of those fiction books that where you don't have to feel guilty about reading it. It's not, you don't feel like it's just kind of fluffy. You learn loads about lots of different subjects through this book, as well as it being a really good read. So I don't read a lot of fiction, but this was one that I definitely enjoyed reading this year.
Okay, next on my list, you may have been familiar with a book and then subsequently a film called The Social Network, which followed Facebook and their dramatic growth and all the controversy that went with it. This book's called Hatching Twitter. I think I mentioned this early on in the year as a book I really enjoyed, and it's made the final list. Hatching Twitter by Nick Bilton. By the way, we will link to all, it's worth saying now, that we'll link to all these links, everything we're going to mention, and as you can see, there's a lot in the show notes. You might want to jot this one down, thepropertyhub.net/2016 faves. That's 2016 faves. Faves. So make sure you check that out. Go to the show notes because they'll all be there. Back to the book. I didn't have massive high hopes for this one because The Social Network, you kind of gone, okay, Facebook, done it. Is this just a spin-off, a copy? Is it Twitter's version, but just a little bit watered down, a bit weaker? Not at all. Really, really interesting. And actually, if I think Twitter had gone on to be as big as Facebook, it probably would have been made into a film as well. I really enjoyed it, and I got through it very, very quickly. If you're interested in business, but also the kind of drama behind it that sometimes exists, then I think you will very much enjoy this book. I really enjoyed it. I recommended it to a few people this year. I'd say go and check it out and add it to your list.
Yeah, that's one that I've been meaning to read for a while. It came out at around the same time as the book about Jeff Bezos at Amazon, which I really enjoyed. And it sounds like the same kind of thing, a massively successful company with an interesting story behind it that you probably don't know. So yeah, I'll definitely be checking that one out. Another one, the final one I'm going to talk about, is someone who you definitely have heard of as well, which is Andre Agassi and his autobiography, which is called Open. This came out quite a few years ago. I think it must be a good 5 years ago, perhaps more. But it was recommended to me this year, and I really, really enjoyed this one. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did because I really am not interested at all in tennis, which you would have thought reading a book about Andre Agassi would be quite important. Turns out not at all, because he's just a really fascinating character. I didn't realise, but he hated tennis. And he hated it from the very first day. He had one of these really pressuring fathers who got him like sort of out there when he was 3 years old, and sort of all the way through he was under this enormous pressure. Then eventually he cracked the big time. He hit the top, had a huge meltdown because he'd achieved this huge success in something that he really didn't care about. But then through his charitable work, he discovered a whole new meaning and went on to conquer the game again. It was a really amazing story. And I think most of that's common knowledge, so I don't think I'd have spoiled the entire book. But it's really worth reading just because It's a great story. It's really well written. And there's so much in there that you could learn about performing at the highest level and how success is about more than just winning. Even when he was winning, because there wasn't any purpose behind it for him, it didn't really mean anything. And his life went majorly off the rails. So it's another really easy read. All the ones I recommended actually are sort of very quick and easy reads. I've got through this in a couple of days and I found it fascinating. So that's probably my biggest recommendation out of the three, even if you don't like tennis.
It's a book that I've heard good things about more than once. So I will definitely purchase that, and I will probably make that my first book in 2017. I'll let you know on the podcast if I do. Talking of podcasts, we're going to recommend a few. We do this each year. And I was speaking to a lady in the St Albans meetup recently, and she was pleasantly surprised that we do recommend other podcasts and was thanking us both, Rob, for doing so, because we help people get onto other things. We're not competitive where we just believe that you should only listen to the property podcast. You should just only listen to us first. But in all seriousness, there are plenty of other good podcasts. There are a load of rubbish ones as well. So we'll make it easy for you and mention some of our favourites of this year. And I'm going to start off, Rob, if you'll indulge me, because I think you'll enjoy this one if you haven't started it yet. I know I've recommended it to you, but it's called How I Built This, and it's by a group called NPR, who make some fantastic podcasts already. But How I Built This is a podcast that interviews each week a major founder or entrepreneur of a business. And when I say major, I mean major. Some of the biggest companies and biggest entrepreneurs in the world have been interviewed on this podcast. It only started this year. It's well produced, as you would expect. Everything by NPR is really interesting, snappy. You feel like you get just about enough, but you kind of want a bit more. But it's just so well done, so well put together. Really interesting people. You know, there's many podcasts out there that interview entrepreneurs. I say that with some hesitation, and they are really, barely businesses yet. Sometimes they get some big names on, but most of the time they don't. This is only big hitters. You will know nearly everybody who's interviewed on this show. So highly recommend it. But Rob, I'm interested. Did I put enough pressure on you to start?
Yeah, you did. I listened to one of them, just one so far, with one of the founders of Airbnb. So I'd recommend that as a good episode to start with, because I did, and it's a really great story as well. If you don't know the story behind Airbnb, it's a great story anyway, and it's really nicely presented on this podcast. So that would be my starting point.
Your first one, which you recommended to me a few weeks ago. I must admit, I've downloaded it. I haven't had the courage to listen yet, but I am interested. Go on. What is it?
This is so geeky. I've had a bit of a weird podcast year, actually. I've not listened to anything mainstream that I think I could recommend. I've listened to a lot of politics, which is not something it's worth getting into on this show. And I've listened to lots of kind of weird niche stuff. So when you asked me for recommendations a few weeks ago, I thought, there's loads of stuff that I like. Well, what could I recommend to any normal human? This one probably is not going to be enjoyed by many normal humans, but it's the London FinTech podcast. If you don't know, FinTech is financial technology. So it's all the kind of the new banks, all the peer-to-peer stuff, anyone who's innovating in finance. If you are not interested in that kind of topic, this will not be the podcast for you. It does get super duper geeky, but it's a recommendation if you are interested in anything like this. And I think it deserves a shout out because the presenter is absolutely brilliant. There are loads of podcasts, hopefully this one not included, where you feel like the host is kind of going through the motions or being a bit wooden. But this guy is super duper smart, full of personality, and he knows his topic inside out. And his enthusiasm for it is amazing. So if I was kind of moderately interested in this topic, but I became very interested in it because he was such a good host. So I think it deserves a shout out for that reason alone.
As I said, I have downloaded it, so I've helped with downloads, but I will listen to it soon. I'm looking forward to Christmas and New Year, that extra bit of bandwidth where you can do things like listen to podcasts. I listen to a lot, and actually would say 2016 has been a strong year for podcasts for me because I've been on the move so much. But I will get there, I will listen. One I highly recommend, and I do highly recommend this one, is Conversations with Tyler. I have no idea how I found this podcast. I don't think it ranks particularly highly. And he produces about one a month on average, but it's so good. So good. So Conversations with Tyler. This gentleman, who interviews people is Tyler Cohen, and he is the head of economics of an American university. I don't think it matters too much at this point which one it is, but you can by all means investigate. And he conducts really, really good interviews. So we've previously recommended, I think last year, the Tim Ferriss podcast made the list, and we highly recommended that. And possibly this is even stronger. So check it out. Basically, the background of this podcast is he interviews the world's greatest thinkers. And whether these are the world's greatest thinkers or not, I can't say. But what I can say, I was very impressed. I was very impressed with the questioning. It wasn't, all fluff. There was some really interesting questions being asked and some really interesting answers coming back. So I'd highly recommend that one. Check it out.
Good recommendation. I'm going to be downloading that straight away. I've read Tyler Cowen's blog for a while. He's a super smart guy, so I'm sure he's asking very intelligent questions. And looking at the list of episodes, there are some, so you can see Peter Thiel on there straight away, who's ridiculously smart and interesting chap. So yeah, that is what I will be checking out straight away. And the final one from me, I said I wasn't going to get into politics, and this is sort of politics, but I'd call it more current affairs. It's the Spectator podcast. And if you know anything about the Spectator, you might think that it's really right-wing, but I've never actually read the Spectator magazine, so maybe it is, I don't know. But the Spectator podcast, I would just describe as interesting, intelligent people talking about news. So it's quite good I don't pay a lot of attention to the news on a day-to-day kind of level, but there are obviously big themes. And so it's quite nice when there's a theme of something you've heard a bit about but don't know a lot about, whether it's American politics, whether it's Syria, whether it's whatever. It's quite nice because you can just listen to smart people talking about it and kind of summing up what they think about it. I don't think it's biased in any particular direction. And it's just good for a kind of like a weekly catch up on what's going on. So if after this year you don't want to hear any news ever again about anything and just bury your head and pretend none of it ever happened, I completely understand that. But if you do want any news, this is a pretty good place to get it from. Okay,
so you've had our books, you've had our podcasts, but of course we couldn't do an episode on our favourite things about apps. I'm going to quickly run through mine. I think some are new, some I mentioned before. The first one I think is a rubbish app. But it has some really good parts to it. So the majority of it is rubbish, but there are some good parts to it. I travel a lot, but I tend to travel by train because it's faster to get to the north by train than it is by car. And I go on the West Coast and East Coast railway lines, and they are run by Virgin. I have had mixed experiences with them, but their app is good because not only do they have the e-tickets, which go straight onto your app, so you don't have to bother with paperwork or anything like that. So it's very easy if you travel a lot, like I do, just getting on with things. But what I really like about it, and I found very useful, is that if a train is running late, you are entitled to compensation. I don't know exactly what the limits are, but I've been entitled to a fair bit of compensation. If you buy through the Virgin Train website, and I use the Virgin Train app to do that, then they automatically refund it if your train is late or delayed by a certain amount of time. That's happened to me, unfortunately, a few times. So that's why I'm recommending it, because, I don't know, I'm sure some people are very good that they will go, right, it was over 30 minutes late, I'll go and claim that back. I've not done it, but I can imagine it being a load of faff. And in the list of priorities of what's important to me, I don't know if I get round to it. So having an app that just automatically does it for me has been great. And it's certainly given me back, a few £100 this year. So that's why I recommend it. That's a great recommendation. It does sound quite mundane, but the fact that it does it all for you is brilliant. And also, I didn't realise you could have your tickets on there, because I've travelled by Virgin Trains before and I've had to mess around with printing things out at the station and all that. So yeah, that's one I'm definitely going to be checking out. And the next one I can see on your list is Pocket, which I've been using for a long time. Didn't realise you did as well. Yeah, well, actually, I got this from you. I think I mentioned it earlier in the year on the podcast, Rob, but it's okay if you're not listening, don't worry. And I just wanted to mention it again because I can see why you so heavily endorsed it. Because it's one of my go-to apps now on my phone or on my computer. Like yourself, I've read a lot of blogs this year. It's probably why my book reading has suffered, because there are so many high-quality blogs out there. And I think Pocket is the best way for consuming those. I'm not going to go on about it too much now because we've talked about it several times before. But go and check it out. It's an app where you can send all your blogs to, as you're on your desktop, you can press a little button with an extension on Chrome, and it'll send it there. I've got some interesting zaps via Zapier, something else we've talked about before, where my favourite blogs automatically go on there. There's lots of cool things you can do. I love the way it strips down the text and all the adverts and the non-essential pictures disappear, so it's easier to read and not get distracted. So many plus points. I can't believe it's free. It's absolutely brilliant. Check it out. And last on the list, I think it's important because I think it's going to be a theme for 2017. The Property Hub, we are pretty good at, a few things. We produce a high quality magazine. Our forum, we spent a lot of time and money on getting that right, and I think it looks fantastic at the moment. But one thing we are definitely pants at is social media. So in 2017, we know many of you use social media. I believe there's a fair proportion of the population that do. So in 2017, we're going to make sure that the Property Hub is well represented there and giving you loads of value as well, not just on our websites, not just in the podcast, not just in the magazine, but also via social media. So leading up to that, I've been playing with a few different types of social media. You're on Twitter. I use Twitter a little bit more. It's just at Rob Dix and at Rob Bence. I quite like it. But one of the social media apps that I didn't think I'd like, but I've really been drawn to, is Instagram. Now, I know most people are going to go, yes, Rob, it's been out a while. I've heard of it. I know, because I've really enjoyed it. I don't like Facebook that much. I know most people do, so I appreciate I'm in a minority. But I just feel it's a bit messy, and there's a lot on there. You'll probably see me on there in 2017, but I think the user experience isn't fantastic. But I just think Instagram is clean. I really like the Instagram stories. I've only just joined there. It's at Rob Bence1. I don't know if there's an at in front, but Rob Bence1. I'm sure you can find me through that or through the Twitter account. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention it because it's really a heads up more than anything that the Property Hub will be well represented on Instagram, on Facebook, Twitter, and wherever else you spend your time socially in 2017. So look out for that.
I hope I'm not going to be put in charge of the Instagram account, because it would be the most boring thing of all time. Here's my desk again. Okay, a few from me quickly. One that surprisingly not that many people know about is the Kindle app. Whenever I look at my book sales, I'm always astonished by how many more paperbacks I sell compared to digital books. And a lot of people still prefer to have the physical book. That's absolutely fine. But speaking to people, a lot of people don't seem to realize that you can read Kindle books without having a physical Kindle. And that's what I do. I use the Kindle app on my phone, and I can download Kindle books to there. So it's worth a shout out just in case people don't realize that you don't actually need a Kindle to read Kindle books. You can get the app that works on pretty much any device you can imagine. And one cool thing on there is it's got lots of nice features, but one of them is called Word Runner. And it's basically something to help you read faster, if you're into that kind of thing. So rather than showing you the whole page and you read scanning along it like you normally would with a book, it presents you one word at a time, and it just flashes each word in front of you, and you can drag the slider along to change the speed to whatever you like. So when I'm reading really easy books like fiction or The Slight Edge, which I talked about earlier, I'll do that at 500 words a minute, which is double the normal reading speed. So it doesn't work for all books. I probably wouldn't want to be trying that with Mr. Rockefeller, for example, but it can work for certain things. You might find it easier to read that way, but if you don't know that the Kindle app exists, well worth checking out.
I love that. I knew the Kindle app existed, but I didn't know about Word Runner, so I will check that one out. Thank you, Mr. D.
Another really quick one is called Should I Answer? I think this has been a resource of the week before. It's worth mentioning again. This is the one that I use for Android. I'm sure others are available for iPhone, but it's a call blocker. And what it does is it's got a big database of all those annoying people that call you about the accident that you had, if you remember that, or anything else that may have happened, or some kind of PPI that you haven't claimed. If you get those all day, then install an app like this. It shuts down probably a good 90% of them, if not more. You get to see every time it blocks a call, and you can look at the stats and see how many, like tens or hundreds of calls it's blocked for you every week. It just saves all those really annoying interruptions. So that's a very easy time saver. And another time saver If you use, or if you have friends who use lots of different messaging apps, then there is a tool called Franz, Franz, which brings all of them together. So this is a big one for me because I've got friends who use Facebook Messenger, I've got friends who use WhatsApp, I've got friends in China who use WeChat and various others. This brings them all together on your laptop in the same place. So you don't have to have alerts going from like 5 different apps just to talk to people. It kind of doesn't matter which one they're using because it brings them all together in the same place. And for me, because I can type much faster on my laptop than I can on my phone, it means that I can message people much more quickly as well. So I've started using WhatsApp really heavily this year with lots of different people. I was about 5 years late to the party on this one, like you were with Instagram probably, Rob. But I've started using it really heavily, but I don't use it on my phone that much. I just use it through Franz. So that won't be relevant for a lot of people, but I've told a few people about it who said it's been a real game changer. So if you do struggle with channel proliferation, then that could be one for you. So loads of really good apps in that roundup. Seems like it's been a good year for apps.
But that's not it. No, we're going to give you extra little bits of pieces, some stuff that really didn't fall into a category, but just things we've enjoyed doing or watching or getting involved with. So I was going to kick off, but actually, Rob, there's been some big news this year that hasn't been announced on a podcast. And considering your cartoon image of you that is out there on the internet is you holding a nice cup of coffee, I think I'm going to break this to the world. You've given up coffee.
I have. And you know what? I don't really miss it that much. It's crazy. It's really, really crazy. I gave it up because I always had trouble with my quality of sleep. And I never drank coffee beyond sort of like early afternoon. But then I'd started reading all these things that said even if you have one coffee in the morning, it can really mess up your sleep. So that's the reason that I kicked coffee. I was kind of hoping it wouldn't make any difference because then I could go back to coffee and try something else. Unfortunately, it worked an absolute treat. So I'm still off coffee. The first few days, I was the grumpiest person on earth. I had a cracking headache. It was awful. But I now I drink a lot of green tea. I have the odd decaf, and it's fine. I'm not going to start getting religious about it and trying to convert everyone, but I can just say if you are making it a New Year's resolution to try and kick a coffee addiction, it can be done, but the first few days will be brutal.
I'm really split on this one because part of me wants to, but the other part, which is probably the addicted part, says don't be silly. It's so lovely. Why would you want to give it up? It's something I've flirted with before, and I suppose the want has got to be a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Tony Robbins always says that. You know, what you've got to want, you've got to have a bigger need or a bigger want, a bigger why, I think he says. So, have we got any resources around Tony Robbins, Rob?
Funny you should mention that.
Look at that.
I was actually going to mention as one of my other kind of miscellaneous things, a couple of really interesting things I watched on Netflix this year. I haven't really watched a lot of TV or movies or anything, but on Netflix, a couple of really good documentaries. One of them is about Tony Robbins. It's called I Am Not Your Guru. And it's by a guy who I can't remember who it is now, but he's done loads of quite big stuff, but he's a big devotee of Tony Robbins. And he's went and filmed one of his really big annual seminars. I think it goes on over about 5 days. There's thousands of people there. It's a really amazing event. I didn't know that much about him and the whole kind of cult around him. I'd read one of his books. I know that a lot of people are big fans, but I didn't really know what goes on at one of those big events. And it really is fascinating to watch. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer or indifferent or whatever, it's just really interesting to see what goes on. And even if you think what he talks about is complete rubbish, the showmanship and the way that he commands a room is unbelievable. So it's really interesting, that one.
Yeah, I've been on a course of his, not that particular one that's featured, and I have watched that on Netflix, and I also endorse it. I think it's a really, really interesting watch. And actually, I wouldn't say you feel like you've been on a course, far from it, but I couldn't help myself but pick up a few little bits and pieces and a few nuggets for myself and my own personal development off the back of watching it. I'm not going to say it was a life-changing experience watching that show, but definitely got my mindset right for certainly immediately after that one. So, yeah, definitely check that out. while we're on Netflix, slightly different, but I really enjoyed it. Narcos, which from the title might not give too much away if you're not heard about it, but it's about the life of Pablo Escobar. Again, a bit like John D. Rockefeller. I knew a bit. I knew he was a guy from Colombia who messed around with drugs or narcotics, but I didn't really know much beyond that. And this series follows his life, over 2 series actually, and it's very, very good. Really, you can tell a lot of money's been thrown at this. Netflix, I think we've mentioned as a resource more than once possibly, because it is really, really good. There's so much high quality stuff on there. I know, Rob, I've recommended a few other bits that aren't making this podcast in particular, but I think Narcos deserves a mention.
Yeah, that's one of those that I've been meaning to watch and probably will do now. And I know that you've been watching Billions as well, which is brilliant.
Yeah, Billions is on Sky, so I'm going to jump off Netflix. But we've both watched Billions. Really, really good. I think what makes it so interesting, and I'm not going to give much away, but you don't know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. The character development is so good, and the cast is fantastic. Well worth a watch, so check out Billions.
And just in case it sounds like we've been sitting in front of the TV all year, there's, what's this? You've been off jet skiing?
Well, yes, I thought I had to. On one of our courses on the Property Hub, so we do a number of free courses that you can take advantage of on the propertyhub.net. And at the end of one, I put a picture of somebody jet skiing and said, money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a jet ski. And have you ever seen anybody unhappy on a jet ski? Now, really, I was a little bit naughty because I actually hadn't been jet skiing at that point, but I'd seen lots of pictures of people smiling on jet skis. So I thought I'd better check it out. And for the last couple of years, I have. I haven't bought a jet ski, but I hire. I think more efficient. You never know, I might go on to buy one at some point. Well, they are so much fun. Now, I am a happy, upbeat person, as you hopefully will get from the podcast. But I'm not a smiley person, so you don't look at me and I haven't got a massive grin across my face, as my wife points out quite regularly. But I am happy inside, I can assure you. But jet skiing, whoa, I could not stop grinning. I had the biggest, stupidest, massivest smile grin on my face the whole time. Absolutely love it. So I just think if you want to check something out, do something a bit different in 2017. Give yourself an achievable goal, because you don't have to have any great level of fitness or skill to go jet skiing. Check it out. And actually, if you're in the south or you want a holiday in the south, on the south coast in Bournemouth Pool, there's a company called Jet Ski Safari. Jet Ski Safari. They're probably going to get a bit of business now and wonder why. But Jet Ski Safari is really cool. I've done that a few times, and they take you out and about around the pool harbour and out to sea. Great fun, great introduction to jet skiing if you're in that part of the world.
That's super cool. I might just do that, you know. That does sound like loads of fun. I'm smiling just hearing you talk about it because you're clearly so enthusiastic about it. So, yeah, that might go on the list for next year.
And finally, Rob, something, and I think it's an important one, and something that people should also consider doing in 2017. We talked about it quite a bit, and we've even mentioned it recently on the podcast, but it seems that 2016 is the year you cracked this and made it a regular habit. What is it? Yeah,
well, you've been off surfing the waves. I've been finding my Zen, and I've been meditating. I'm just a few days off 100 days in a row. And it's one of these things, going back to the slight edge, which I talked about earlier, it's those little kind of daily habits. And I think the research says something like you have to do something for 60 days and then it becomes a habit and you don't really have to think about it anymore. So at first it's a bit of an effort, and kind of like with giving up coffee as well. Every day it was like, oh, I really want to. And then after a certain number of days, it just becomes a habit. It's just a thing that you do or you don't do. So I think it's interesting from that angle, even if you're not into meditation. I think it's just interesting to see how you can form a habit. And so for the first few weeks, it was a bit of it felt like an effort to find time in the day to do it. But then it just became like a thing that I do. And while I wouldn't say that it's completely changed my life, one of the components of it, I've experimented with lots of different types, and it's the gratitude meditation that I found has really made a difference for me. So just spending a bit of time focusing on the good things in your life, it really has made a difference. It sounds a bit hippie-ish, but I think it's important. Coming up to the end of a year as well, looking back at all the things that have gone well and all the things that you're lucky to have in your life, it's worth having a bit of focus on. So you don't have to carve out loads of time. I just sort of do it for 5-10 minutes a day, but making it a regular practice has been helpful.
There's a famous saying, probably from a Buddhist monk. I'll say that because it makes it sound more important. And that saying is, if you haven't got time to meditate for 20 minutes a day, then you actually need to meditate for 2 hours a day. And I think the point is that if your life is that chaotic and crazy that you can't fit in 5-10 minutes like Rob does meditation, then you probably need it more than you think. So check it out. I am not disciplined to do it every day, but I just grab it when I need it. I kind of know myself well enough that I just need a little reset, and I'll go and meditate, and it makes all the difference. Highly recommend it. Something that I know in 2017 I'm going to give even more time to. Because 2016 has been a very busy year, and I think meditation is a great way to keep you sane, on the right path, doing the best things you can, and highly recommend it, as we always have done. It makes a big difference to us. If we recommend it so highly, then check it out. I think that's probably a good enough endorsement.
So, loads of links in there. The show notes for this episode are going to be absolutely packed. If you're interested in checking out any of those books, podcasts, apps, or other bits that we've talked about, hopefully there'll be at least something in there that's grabbed your attention and that you want to check out further. You don't have to worry about remembering the name of it or scribbling down a link. You can just go to the show notes, which are at thepropertyhub.net/2016faves. Now, there's another famous saying that I remember from a Buddhist monk, I believe, who said, "True happiness comes from leaving an iTunes review for the Property Podcast. That way lies true enlightenment." So is anyone following the righteous path this week?
Luckily, they have been listening to that very wise monk and leaving reviews, so thank you very much. This week, we acknowledge the wonderful person that is Ben. And Ben says, "I finally caught up with the back catalogue of episodes, and I can't recommend this podcast highly enough. It contains a bucket load of tremendous value from start to finish. I'm currently getting my first deposit together while expanding my property knowledge in the meantime. A huge thank you to Rob and Rob for giving me the education I needed to get started, pointing me towards valuable resources and changing my approach. Please keep doing what you're doing, guys. Ben." Thank you, Ben. And thank you to all the people who leave reviews. Keep doing what you're doing. We absolutely love it. Thank you so much.
Yep, and we will keep doing it. And next year, we will hopefully start doing it even better. I've got a few things in the pipeline.
Oh, you tease.
So you better make sure that you subscribe to hear all of that. We do episodes mainly about property. This one has not been particularly property heavy, but all these things are kind of around business and about making yourself a more successful, educated person, which all ties into property investment, because it's not just about going out there and buying a house or a flat. It's about all the goals and the mindset and everything else around it, which hopefully we emphasize plenty. And we have got some cool stuff coming up. So if you do not subscribe, make it a part of your week. Go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast and you'll find a video on there that tells you exactly how to subscribe, whether you're using iPhone or Android. You get every episode automatically downloaded into your phone every Tuesday and Thursday morning. So you don't have to worry about missing out, and you make that a habit. You make learning about property part of every week.
Another thing you should be checking out, and touch on it in this episode, is the free courses on the Property Hub. Of course, sign up to the Property Hub. It's absolutely free, but make sure you take advantage of the free courses as well. Christmas, New Year, most people, while we're crazy, we also have a bit of spare time as well. And maybe getting away from the family or the intense situations you're in, get yourself a pair of headphones, get them on your computer and watch a course or two, and get your knowledge shipshape for 2017, because I know you'll want to make it a good one. And Rob and I are recording another course over the next few weeks, so we'll tell you more about that soon. But that's not the only thing that's coming in 2017, you'll be pleased to hear.
No, we've got plenty up our sleeves. So on next week's podcast, we're going to be looking at what to expect from us in 2017, and we're also going to be reviewing the year. That's the year in terms of the year we've had and the year in property in general. There's been no shortage of things to talk about. So we're going to be looking back and looking forward fittingly for our last podcast of the year next week.
So until then, we will be back on Tuesday with Ask Ron and Rob, where we'll answer at least a couple of your questions. And then, as we said, we'll be back next week to look back on 2016 and look forward to 2017 and talk about what's coming up next. That's definitely one you do not want to miss. So until then, everyone, have fun. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.